about the Odyssey, the question of the journey. What is it that you have learned? And of course, as you are juniors, it's always fascinating to ask this question. As you finish your junior year, as you begin your senior year, what is it that you've learned during the journey, the ride of your high school career? Notice what he says. I knew one thing. I knew where the journey was begun, that it was itself a learning of the beginning, and the beginning was infinitely worth the learning. The journey was well undertaken. In other words, he says, the most important part about the journey is knowing when you started the journey and where it began. Now let's jump to 2a really quickly. We'll maybe ask, what are some major messages or themes in a little memoir like this one? Let's list several. 1, wherever you're going begins on where you began. Don't ever forget where you came from. Don't ever forget where you started. Of course, the great Taoist Chinese writer Lao Tzu says in the Tao Te Ching that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We're familiar with this, so let's write this one down as another major message. Journeys always have to begin with the first step. And of course, you can think about your life as a journey to this point. And as you look back, you can begin to think about that odyssey or that journey had, just like this reading, all kinds of obstacles, all kinds of challenges. Finally, a third possible message or meaning here is that as we grow up, things come into our life and then we have to let them go. Pecos for a while, and then he has to let it go, and he moves on with his life. It's possible at 3b you may think about objects in your life that at one point were really important to you, and now you've kind of let those go. And then you'll probably pick up others, and you'll let those go. At 2b, of course, we have to point out this is a memoir, but let's also say we have very interesting referencing here going on to the classic Greek tale of the Odyssey, and the notion that in some ways, the young boy is growing up by going through a journey where he has all these different kinds of events, and he learns some important things by the end. Of course, let's go ahead now and try and relate to this text in our own ways, starting with how do you relate to other titles. I've already mentioned Whitman's Song of the Open Road. We've already mentioned Homer's Odyssey. We can think about all of the classic epic poems that we will study in our lifetime. That, of course, I've mentioned the Odyssey, but we have to mention the Iliad. We have to mention Virgil's Aeneid, don't we? We many times will mention Dante's Divine Comedy, Milton's Paradise Lost. All of these will share in common some notion of a journey. And in some ways, we can, of course, now jump to 3b and ask the question, in what ways has your experience of high school been a journey? And in some ways, haven't you had some similar kinds of adventures? Some of them happy, some of them sad, some of them painful. Interestingly, sometimes the painful experiences are some of our most important experiences. For example, watch this. What for you was your most important experience of your junior year? Is there something that you can qualify, or maybe you might say the last few months of your last semester? What is it for you that's been the most painful experience and yet maybe the most growth-producing experience for you? Do you have one of those that maybe you can write down? Another interesting question that works well with this one is, in this story, he has to let go of his pony over time. What for you has been the most difficult thing to let go of, and yet you realize looking back you had to do it to keep going in the journey called your life? You had to let go of something. It might have been a friendship, might have been a relationship, might have been somebody who passed in and out of your life because of death or something else, and you had to move on. You had to let it go. Is there somebody in your life like that? Well, there you go, an introduction to Momaday's names. Thank you.